This is Adopting Identities by This Is Entertaining, read to you by Evening Ruby. Rating: Teen and Up audiences. Categories: F/M, General. Chapter 2. Pepper batters away the group's complaints about her plan effortlessly. But even so, she felt a flash of relief when Steve suddenly announced that he had to leave. The relief was immediately vanquished the instant she heard what exactly was in the text, but nonetheless, it succeeded to quiet the arguments of the group. The next day, nearly half the team left for Europe. Steve, Sam, and Natasha went to attend the funeral, and Pepper headed to Vietnam to discuss the compromise with the UN. When the bomb goes off, she's standing at the foot of the platform, waiting for the king to finish his speech. Only luck that she was looking in T'Challa's direction, and reflexes born from the constant danger of living with Iron Man kept her from meeting the same fate as the Wakandan king. As it stands, the fact that she was still alive did nothing to mitigate Tony's wrath for the supposed culprit James Buchanan Barnes, nor his anger at Steve, who remained so steadfastly confident in his friend's innocence. Natasha, Sam, and Steve nearly managed to get Bucky out despite the security force sent by the UN and T'Challa's reveal as the Black Panther. But Tony and Rhodey's arrival put a stop to it. Fortunately, they were all together when they realized the psychologist was a fake and managed to incapacitate the Winter Soldier before the asset managed to make off with a helicopter. Worried about the reaction of Everett, they took the brainwashed super soldier to a secure location. It only took a few horror-filled moments after Bucky regains consciousness for them to realize how dangerous it would be if Zemo managed to awaken the other super soldiers. Of course, everything truly hit the fan when Bucky revealed his hand in the death of the Starks. It took the strength of all four of the other Avengers to stop Tony from tearing apart the soldier who was still pinned by the arm. Tony had stormed out, furious, Rhodey following to protect his distraught friend. The remaining Avengers quickly left for the tower to pick up Vision, and to Lagos to grab Wanda. No one was sure when he'd showed up, but at some point Clint had managed to sneak in as well. Natasha and Sam even suggested stopping for two more, knowing that if super soldiers were awoken, they would need all the help they could get. T'Challa was perfectly willing to join once it was established that Bucky was not behind his father's death, and Scott Lang nearly peed his pants when the Avengers showed up at his front door. As they land in Siberia, they're joined by Iron Man and War Machine. While Tony still harbored an intense resentment for the death of his mother, he himself had witnessed the stark difference between the Winter Soldier and Bucky Barnes when the man was escaping from the headquarters in Berlin. So they marched into the compound together, all 9 of them, as a unit. Honestly, after that the whole fight was fairly anticlimactic, especially when Zemo's big weapon was revealing how the Starks died. Even as Tony struggled to control himself and the rage that burned in his heart while watching his mother be murdered with such cold, unremorseful efficiency, War Machine decimated the bunker, and Zemo was taken down within seconds. Within the hour of their arrival in Siberia, Zemo was handed over to Everett Ross. Bucky and Cap are headed to Wakanda with T'Challa to put Bucky to sleep until they can be confident his programming is gone. In the words of Ant-Man, as the rest of the Avengers left for the tower, "Wait, that was seriously it?" The next week passed fairly smoothly, at least in comparison. Because Lang wasn't actually seen much, he was asked to keep his part in the Avengers a secret. A hidden weapon for when something went really wrong. Honestly, the man was so happy to be part of the team he didn't seem to care. A large smile stretched across the thief's face for the entire exchange as he enthusiastically shook the hands of each Avenger on his way out the door. T'Challa was somewhat of a reserve Avenger as well, living and reigning in Wakanda, but with the promise to help whenever he was called. All in all, in spite of some obviously hurt feelings, a couple of cold shoulders, and a pointed silence or two, the next week was no worse than an awkward family gathering where everyone is bitter about some past slight. Which was why, when Pepper called the team into the conference room early the next Tuesday, everyone was present within moments. She waited until everyone was seated and expectant before speaking. A bandage tightly wrapped around her ankle and a sling cradling her arm the only sign of her recent brush with death. She waved her good arm at the large monitor behind her, the default Stark logo immediately getting replaced by an image of a brown-haired boy smiling awkwardly in a clearly default school photo. Meet Peter Parker, our prime candidate for adoption. The room immediately broke into complaints and arguments, Tony's loud voice sounding over the mixed babble of the rest of the team. Remind me to fire the doctor I keep on retainer. She promised me Pepper didn't have a concussion, but obviously something got knocked loose if she still thinks bringing a kid into this is a good idea after everything that just happened. What just happened is exactly why it's so important that we continue with the plan, Pepper argued. Zemo wasn't a mastermind trying to take over the world. He wasn't even trying to grab power. He was a grieving father, husband, and son who lost everything and watched as all of you seemed to walk away from Sokovia without a scratch. We tried to keep Quicksilver's death quiet so that we all, especially Wanda, could grieve in peace without the media kicking up a storm. I stand by that decision wholeheartedly, but it meant that the world didn't see your grief. They didn't see you mourn for the lives lost in the horrendous affair. We know that we have mourned, but the problem with being set on a pedestal is that in order for people to see anything, you need to use broad strokes or it gets lost in the distance and height. We're working on doing just that. The relief agencies are well on their way, and some of the world's leading trauma psychologists are working for us as counselors. I even managed to convince Ross to let one of our guys handle taking Zemo through his grief. But as I said, throwing around money isn't going to work. Adoption is our best option. I do not know, Wanda admitted hesitantly, her eyes still clouded in grief from the mention of her brother. I feel as though it would not be right to put a child in danger such as is so common in our lives. Pepper nodded. That's why we focused on finding an older child. Though he is still young, at 15, Peter will know well enough that when the Avengers say to go somewhere or do something, then he should listen immediately, especially in case of emergencies. Besides, I'm sure Tony could come up with a few security measures to ensure his safety. The scientist grunted before nodding. I mean, sure, of course I could. In my sleep, probably. But Pepper, you really can't be serious about this. Sam crossed his arms. Yeah, this kid will be targeted by every enemy we have, or could have. Precautions are one thing, but we're painting a target on his back big enough to see from space. The others nodded. Pepper merely fixed them with a stern stare. Yes, he will be in danger, but no more danger than I am in. Yeah. And you've almost died how many times now? 5? 6? Or is it more? I've lost count, Tony pointed out. But the CEO pressed on. If you, the Avengers, can't protect him, how can you claim to protect the world? It isn't just you and I here in the tower anymore, Tony. We're together, a team capable of defeating armies. Peter will be made aware of the dangers before I file for adoption forms, I promise you. This time Natasha spoke up with an argument, but Pepper quickly shot it down. The CEO had just finished her counter when another Avenger spoke up with a complaint. It seemed to go on, but the woman was always prepared with an answer, just as she had been when they had made the exact same arguments a week previous. Finally, Steve simply sighed, with his head buried in his hands, resigned. Between Peggy, her niece, Natasha, and Pepper, he wasn't sure why he bothered trying to argue with women anymore. It never turned out well for him. So, what exactly is it about this young man that makes him such an ideal subject for adoption? Vision asked. Even his super processor of a mind was incapable of refuting the redhead. Pepper smirked, clearly proud, yet unsurprised at her victory. This is Peter Parker. He's 15 years old, 5'10", 167 pounds according to his last medical checkup. He has brown hair, hazel eyes, and a sob story that will win America's Got Talent just by standing on the stage. First, he He was orphaned 8 years ago, when he was 7 in an accident caused by Tony's fight with Obadiah Stane. His parents, Richard and Mary Parker, were a young couple well on their way to being known as great genetic scientists. They were on their way to the airport to meet with someone. It was never determined who, when they were hit by a car swerving to avoid the fight. Tony didn't look up from where his knuckles were turning white from their grip on his drink. Pepper cast the man a sympathetic look, but chose to continue rather than draw out his torture. His uncle and aunt, Ben and May Parker, took him in afterwards. A few months after the Battle of New York, his uncle was shot and killed right in front of him. Shot by a man named Martin Crawley. During the Shintari invasion, both Carley's home and place of business were destroyed. He had a spotless criminal record before the invasion. We think he's one of the many New Yorkers who resorted to crime to survive after the attack. After that, Peter's only remaining family was his aunt. She died a few months ago. She had been walking to work and was caught in the chaos of Ultron when he tried to escape with the body. She studiously avoided looking to Vision, but couldn't avoid catching the usually controlled man flinch at the corner of her eye. Since then, he's been passed around from foster home to foster home and kicked out every few weeks for sneaking out and getting into fights in the middle of the night. Pepper leaned back for a moment, allowing the group to process her words. She was met with hard, steady eyes, downcast frowns, and stares leveled in determination. Of course, that's not the only reason why my team chose him. Unfortunately, there are hundreds of kids with stories just as tragic. We chose Peter because... She turned her gaze to Tony. He has a genius-level IQ that put him on Stark's lab internship mailing list since he started middle school. She turned to where Steve and Falcon were sitting, which of course made him a prime target for bullies, but that didn't stop him from standing up for others who were being picked on. And now he's all alone and could really use a friend who knows something about dealing with grief. Then to Natasha. Also, he is apparently stealthy and sneaky enough to capture high-quality photos of not only Spider-Man, but Daredevil, and even us. The pictures from the Daily Bugle filled the screen, and Natasha rose a single eyebrow and gave a nod in acquisition that the boy had accomplished quite a feat. In addition, he is old enough to be capable of following any safety protocols and smart enough to know that he shouldn't deviate, and quick-witted enough to think through an alternate solution if he is incapable of going through the set protocols. Vision nods at that, and for a moment, silence reigned until Rhodey broke it. "What? Wanda and I don't get presents?" Pepper smirked. "I'm sure you'll find something." Tony stood suddenly, an unhappy look still marring his face. "Well, if that's all then, I'll be in the lab trying to make sure this doesn't blow up in our faces, possibly literally." As the man stormed off, Pepper cast a glance at Rhodey, knowing that her presence would do nothing to comfort or help her stressed boyfriend. Yeah, I'm going. At least I'll have plenty of babysitting practice." Vision stood silently. "I will go as well. Hopefully my time of knowing the inner workings of the tower's security might be helpful in improving it." Wanda stood too, though she claimed she was going to pick out a room for the boy rather than follow the other three. Sam and Steve left together, no doubt for the two to talk over the situation while the super soldier destroys a couple of punching bags or something similar. Natasha left without a word, possibly to call Clint or some of the other Avengers not stationed in the tower. However, Pepper did notice the woman pull up the Daily Bugle's photography page as she left. As the last Avengers left the room, the CEO allowed herself to collapse into the closest chair. "Friday?" "Yes, Miss Potts," the automated voice sounded. "Schedule me for a massage at the parlor I like tomorrow." "Would 2 p.m. be acceptable?" "Perfect." She had a feeling that she would be a regular before all this was over.